The morning sun beams on a young man who sits upon his black stallion. The morning sun, a prelude to the searing heat it would deal out later in the day. But the young man doesn't think about this. He is eyeing an overwhelmingly large army across the plains. The black stallion paws the ground anxiously. The horse will be forever known as Bucephalus, and the young man on his back, Alexander the Great. The Persian army dwarfs Alexander's. Man and beast know this victory will not come easy, but a victory will all but open the doors for these two to conquer the known world. But first, they must claim victory here at Arbela, better known as the Battle of Gaugamela. So hello, kiddies. Today we travel back in time to 331 BC. Another greatest battle in history, as we join the Macedonian army led by a young Alexander the Great, who faces a much larger Persian army led by Darius III, king of Persia. This battle, known forever as the Battle of Gaugamela, is the second and final bout between these two. Alexander and Darius III first met at the Battle of Issus in November of 333 BC, where Darius lost to Alexander, with Alexander capturing Darius's mother, wife, and two daughters, Stateria II and Drapitis. Alexander also claimed all of southern Asia Minor after this win, Darius retreating all the way back to Babylon. Alexander then laid siege to Tyre in 332 BC, a 7-month engagement that earned Alexander control of the Levant. Then Alexander took Gaza. All the while, Darius was trying to use diplomacy to stop Alexander from continuing his march into Persia. All offers placed before Alexander, Alexander rejected. Quite a few different accounts are told, but by different historians, on Darius's attempts to bring Alexander to the negotiating table, but one fact is certain: Alexander rejected them all. Parmenion, one of Alexander's commanders, spoke up on Darius's supposed third attempt, saying, "If I were Alexander, I should accept what was offered and make a treaty." And supposedly Alexander replied, "So should I if I was Parmenion." Darius had no choice but to meet Alexander in battle once again. The summer of 331 BC saw Alexander leave Egypt, moving towards the Tigris River through modern-day Syria. Late summer saw Alexander reach the Thapsus on the Euphrates River. It stated Darius had sent Mazaeus with 3,000 cavalry to guard the Euphrates River crossings near Thapsus, but Mazaeus retreated upon Alexander's arrival. Alexander reached the Tigris River by late September of that year. After crossing the Euphrates, Alexander took a northerly route instead of the usual southeastern direct route that went directly to Babylon. This move kept Alexander's left flank protected by the Armenian mountains and the Euphrates River, also allowing his men to easily forage for food and supplies, while keeping them away from the extreme heat that the direct route would have bore down on the Macedonian troops. And though Alexander found the Tigris crossing, he took it. The crossing was no easy task. The depth and the strong current of the river were no easy matter to overcome. Mazaeus did incorporate some scorched earth tactics in front of Alexander in hopes to deny Alexander the ability to forage and the ability to supply his troops. On the 20 and 21st of September 331 BC, a total lunar eclipse happened just after Alexander crossed the Tigris, which I'm sure had some mystical consequences for both armies. You know, having bad omens, good omens, and such. Alexander then learned of Darius' position near Gaugamela after capturing some Persian cavalry. Darius was only 8 miles away in an area picked by him, and Darius had even performed some basic terraforming tactics to make the battlefield of his choosing even more on the side of his army and his chariots. Alexander, knowing this, figured Darius would not change his position, having chose his battlefield. Alexander, in no hurry, allowed his men to rest for 4 days before engaging Darius and his army. So it has to be about around the 1st of October when the Battle of Gaugamela took place. Many experts chastised Darius for not harassing Alexander when he traveled through Mesopotamia, but Alexander's northern route probably came as a shock to the Persians, catching them off guard. Some even say Alexander chose Gaugamela as his battlefield site, but others argue that Darius chose the site. And Darius, having time to do some terraforming and clear away brush and stuff for his chariots tends to make me think he was the one that chose the battlefield, not Alexander. The precise battle site has never been found, but all agree it is on the Nineveh plains of modern Iraq, east of Mosul and west of Erbil. There are many debates to the Persian army's actual size, but the average, the most acceptable numbers is around 100,000 troops. Darius had up to 200 war chariots and even had around 15 war elephants. Also, he had 2,000 Greek mercenary units. It also said Darius had some Indian troops in his army. Though Darius commanded the overwhelmingly large number of troops, Alexander had the better trained, battle-hardened troops. His peasantry were armed with a 6-meter long spike or spear known as a sarissa. Now, in Darius's army, the only units that could match up to Alexander's troops were his Greek mercenaries and his 10,000 immortals. Those were the only units that had the training that could be equivalent to Alexander's army. But the Greeks used the phalanx attack with shorter spears, and the immortal spears were even shorter still. Alexander's army was 31,000 heavy infantry strong, 9,000 light infantry, including peltists and archers. The accompanying cavalry numbered around 7,000. The Persians were already arrayed in battle formations on the battlefield when Alexander and his troops arrived. Darius had Scythe chariots and had the battlefield prepared for these weapons of war. The Persians were arrayed as follows. Darius and his best infantry was in the center. On his right, the Carian cavalry, Greek hoplites, and the Persian horse guards. In the right center, Darius had the immortals, the Indian cavalry, and his Mardian archers. Both flanks had Persian cavalry. The left flank, which had Bactrians, Dayak cavalry, Arachosian cavalry, Persian cavalry, Susian cavalry, Codusian cavalry, and the Scythians, were led by Bessus, who commanded the left flank. Chariots were placed in the front with a detachment of Bactrians to support. Mazaeus had command of the right flank with Syrian, Medrian, Mesopotamian, Parthian, Sosian, Tepurian, Hyrasian, Caucasian Albanian, Sasanian, Cappadocian, and Armenian cavalry at his command. The Cappadocians and Armenians led the right flank, while the Albanian cavalry was sent to flank the Greek left. The archers were all armati. The Macedonians had two commands. Parmenion commanded the left flank, while Alexander commanded all others, riding with his companion cavalry. He also had Paeonian and Greek light cavalry. The mercenary cavalry were divided into two: veterans on the flanks of the right, the rest in front of the Agrarians and Greek archers who were next to the phalanx. Parmenion commanded the Thessalonians and other Greek mercenaries and the Thracian cavalry on his left flank. They were to hold their ground as Alexander moved into position to strike a decisive blow to the Persian army from the right side. The right center had Cretan mercenary with Thessalonian cavalry and Achaean mercenaries backing them up. To their immediate right was more allied Greek cavalry than the phalanx. Arrayed in a double line, the rear line of the phalanx was ordered to deal with any flanking units, since the Macedonians' cavalry basically outnumbered the Greeks 5-1, with the Persian cavalry stretching over a mile longer than the Macedonian cavalry. Flanking was basically inevitable. Alexander ordered his infantry to march phalanx formation toward the Persian center, their wings in a 45-degree echelon formation in order to lure the Persian cavalry into attack. Darius sent a large part of his cavalry to attack Parmenion, who was on his right. He also engaged a number of regular infantry to back up his cavalry. As the center phalanx engaged the Persian center, Alexander performed a most unusual strategy by turning and riding straight towards the right, parallel with the battle line with his companion cavalry. Alexander's ploy was to draw as many Persian cavalry with him as possible, hoping to open up a gap in the Persian lines, a gap that could be exploited to attack Darius directly. This was a bold strategy that required damn near perfect timing, and the maneuvers had to be damn near perfect. This bold move would also force Darius to attack first, forcing his hand. The Scythian cavalry on Darius's left wing tried to flank Alexander and his companion cavalry to the right. Although outnumbered greatly, the companion cavalry used disciplined tactics and moves to contain the Scythian cavalry. Alexander's right sustained many losses but held up, with Alexander keeping his movement to the right, not allowing the Persian cavalry to turn his flank and drive him asunder. The Greeks finally gained the upper hand when Arides Prodromoi attacked, giving the Greeks the upper hand. By this time, the opening Alexander was so hoping to create was finally starting to take shape. Darius, meanwhile, had launched many chariots straight at Alexander and his companion cavalry, but most of the chariots were engaged by the Agrianians and the other javelin throwers who helped to protect the companion cavalry. The chariots that broke through passed harmlessly by the companion cavalry, who opened up, letting these chariots pass, while the Hippaspus and Greek cavalry mopped up, destroying the chariot survivors. The Persian left wing kept trying to flank the Greeks farther and farther, thus opening up the spot Alexander was looking for to make his decisive attack. He formed up his guards brigade and any phalanx battalions he could find. Alexander formed a wedge shape with him at the head. Suddenly, Alexander drove this wedge, smashing straight through Darius' center, straight towards Darius and his guard, decimating Darius' royal guard and the Greek mercenaries who were there too. It was at this time, seeing he was in imminent danger, Darius broke and ran, fleeing for his life away from the battlefield. Alexander was poised to pursue Darius, but Parmenion had sent desperate pleas from the left for help. The left wing was being entirely surrounded by the Persian right wing. Alexander chose to save his army and pursue Darius later. During the melee, a gap between the left and center of the Macedonian phalanx opened up, and the Persian and Indian cavalry stormed the gap, and instead of engaging Parmenion in the rear, destroying him, they attacked the Greek camp, even trying to rescue Darius' mother, Sisygambis, but she refused. It was then the rear guard phalanx fell upon the Indian and Persian cavalry, driving them away from the camp. The next engagement is known as the fiercest melee of the entire battle. Alexander and his companion cavalry smashed directly into the cavalry on the Persian right, the bravest and best trained divisions of the Persian cavalry. 60 of Alexander's companion cavalry were killed. Hephaestion, Conus, and Menidus were each injured, but the Greeks won the day. The melee forcing Mesias to start pulling his forces back, the same way Bessus did, but the Persians fell into disarray and routed, being mowed down by Thessalonian and other Greek cavalry as they tried to flee the battlefield, following in Darius' footsteps, who had fled earlier on his horse. The defeat of Darius at Gaugamela was an epic disaster for Darius III. While Alexander gained 4,000 more talents, the king's personal chariot and bow, all the war elephants, Darius escaped on horseback, planning to go east and raise another army to face Alexander once again, and Darius was going to ask his eastern satraps to remain loyal, but other plans were made, and Bessus murdered Darius before he could travel any farther east. When Alexander heard of Darius' betrayal and murder by Bessus, Alexander was saddened and gave Darius a full burial ceremony at Persepolis, the former ceremonial center of the Persian Empire. Alexander then pursued Bessus, capturing him and executing him for murdering Darius. The Achaemenid Persian Empire basically ended with the death of Darius III, and Alexander continued on his way to the far reaches of the known world, eventually dying tragically and mysteriously at a young age, leaving his conquered empire without an heir and broken forever. And this is my greatest battles of history. I'm Big Duke 6 from CoolKegs Productions, and please subscribe, hit the noti bell, comment, like. I would appreciate it. And thank you to all my friends and family who are loyal supporters of this channel. And remember, friends, Civis Pacem Para Bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Until next time.